pastors who kill their wives. The eerily similar stories of the Millers and the Turners. Both couples met after having affairs with the men as married pastors of their church. The women were also previously married. Heather had a son and Micah didn't have children but became a stepmother to JP's children.
One day, I get a phone call from this lady that was a member of the church, all panicking. Oh my God, have you heard what happened? Have you heard what happened? Andy, he got caught having an affair with Heather. And I said, no, you're crazy. So I called him. And I'm like, Andy, what happened, man? And he's like, man, I was counseling Heather and Philip. They was going through some stuff in their marriage, and I got sucked in. I said, Andy, you're a preacher. You're a man of God. You've told me how wrong this is.
You know, it came out that they were having an affair, and it blew the church up.
Or J.P. Miller and his future wife Micah met when she was 14 years old. Her family had just started attending worship services at Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach. JP was a youth pastor at the time, growing into a more significant role at Solid Rock over the following years. When Micah was 18 years old, John Paul officiated her wedding to his good friend, a man named Jeremy Days. Both Micah and Jeremy were involved in the church. He ran the sports ministry, and she worked on the media team in addition to other responsibilities. Eventually, Micah took on the role as John Paul's secretary and babysitter for his growing family. In 2015, JP's wife Allison discovered her husband and their babysitter in a compromising position. Shortly after, JP and Micah's affair became public knowledge. In 2016, both marriages ended in divorce. Jeremy and Allison each eventually left the Solid Rock Church, where only 1 year later, JP and Micah were married. At the age of 23, Micah became the stepmother to 44-year-old John Paul's 5 children, 4 from his first marriage with Allison, and the eldest from a previous relationship. Micah also took on a greater role within the church as the pastor's wife. She was a worship leader, did graphic design, and oversaw the women's and youth ministries.
Both women were married to the men that eventually took their lives for about 7 years. Both women were accused of self-inflicted pew-pew wounds to their heads. Both stories are very suspicious. Andy Turner's mother worked at the courthouse where Heather worked. She made Andy aware of any internal messages between Heather Turner and Rob Herbert. They had begun to be very close, and on May 2, 2010, Heather was going to leave Andy for Rob after her day at work. Andy knew this, so he stopped it from ever happening. Heather would tell her coworker Rob about the abuse she suffered from Andy. She also told Rob that she never was married to Andy. She never gave vows with Andy. Andy knew how to get a fake marriage certificate made, and he did. Look at the dates on here. Look at Judge Anderson's signatures. Are those signatures written by the same person? Gary Huff claims he did not marry them, nor did he sign the certificate. Heather couldn't file for divorce since she wasn't legally married. But unfortunately, Micah was legally married to John Paul Miller.
Sure. Well, we said we were going to do 5 promises, but I just have one, that I'll be yours 100%. 100% of my encouragement, 100% of my efforts to make your dreams come true, 100% of everything that I am, I give to you.
I'm going to try to beat that. I'm just kidding. Okay, so I promise to always strive to continuously lead you to Jesus. I promise to always support your enthusiastic personality. I promise to remain faithful, loyal, and encouraging to you. And I promise to strive to love you the way Christ loved the church and gave himself for it.
It was just after Micah Miller served John Paul with divorce papers that she was found dead in North Carolina. The very next day, John Paul announces his estranged wife's death at his church.
Leave church quietly and don't talk about the announcement here in the building, please, if you can, so y'all can stand to your feet. Before I make the announcement, I also want to say that my request to you is that you will continue to come to church and serve and give for the next little bit, because I don't want to have, I'm taking a little bit of a break, and I don't want to have to worry about the church. My break may be a few days, a few weeks, I don't know. I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away. And yeah, it was self-induced, and it was up in North Carolina. And we're going to have a funeral for her next Sunday here at 3 p.m. And so it's all I can, I'm just kind of going on adrenaline right now. So y'all pray for me and my kids and everybody. And y'all knew that she wasn't well mentally, and that she needed her medicine that was hard to get to her. And so I'm sure there'll be more details to come. But just keep our family in your prayers. And I'm going to let Pastor Randall, my bishop, he can pray. I'll get him a microphone. He'll pray.
Micah Miller spoke on abuse in marriage when she was separated from John Paul.
So today my heart's a little heavy. I've had a lot of women that have reached out to me about situations of abuse. And I just want to tell you what a lot of people have told me lately and reminded me, because I think I forgot. I knew, but I pushed it in the back of my head just because of my situation. But you are the bride of Christ. Before anybody else's bride, male or female, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what gender you are. Abuse is abuse. And you are the bride of Christ. And my Bible says that he took all the abuse you could think of for you so that you didn't have to live that life of slavery and bondage and pain. Jesus took it all for you. So you don't have to stay in a abusive relationship, whether that's sexual, whether that's somebody forcing you to take illegal drugs, or alcohol abuse, or physical abuse, psychological abuse, making you think that this is all your fault, or you're a bad mom, or you're a bad wife, or you're a bad husband, or you're not giving it your all when you know you are. God hates divorce, but why? According to everybody I've asked and the scriptures that I've found, it's because it hurts people. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that? So I want to remind you, like a bunch of people have been reminding me lately, that I'm God's bride first. And even an earthly spouse who's a good spouse, when they know that their bride is being hurt, just imagine what an earthly spouse does. What do you think your heavenly spouse does when you're the bride of Christ and he sees his bride going through abuse and hurt? What do you think he thinks about that? So, encouragement in all this is, you are the bride of Christ first before anybody else's. And he's got you. And he sees you. And he loves you.
So we received the affidavit of Sierra Francis asking the probate court to appoint her as a special administrator to her sister Micah Miller's estate. In those documents, Francis states that Miller expressed the abuse and violence against her by her husband, John Paul Miller, to others, including family members and members of the church. It also states that Miller told her family that, quote, "If I end up with a bullet in my head, it was not by me, it was JP," end quote. And Francis states that Miller forwarded a family group text message notifying them that Mr. Miller was served divorce papers on April 25th, 2024. Well, these are just a few depositions given by her sister and brother. You can read the full report right now at WBTW.com.
The friends and family of both of these ladies all say that there's no way either of them would have lived themselves. Micah Miller was only 30 years old. Why would she go through the trouble of filing for divorce, getting her own apartment and her new job at a restaurant if she was just going to end it all anyway? Heather Turner was only 35 and she had a young daughter with Andy as well as her son with her first husband. Heather's friends say she wouldn't have wanted to leave her children. So what has happened to the husbands since the wives were allegedly murdered by them? Looks like Andy Turner owns a big business with studios that make films. He also looks like he is married again even though his former nanny and girlfriend he was cheating with on Heather had accused Andy of physical abuse. How does he get away with it all? Heather Turner's case is still listed as unsolved and they have not clearly said it was a suicide or homicide. Andy Turner has never been questioned by police. Although J.P. Miller seems to have gotten away with murder of his wife Micah, he is being arrested for other crimes. In the meantime, Micah's attorney is still fighting for her justice.
I want to give you an update now on the arrest of Pastor John Paul Miller. We just got his mugshot. He was arrested on Wednesday for assault and battery, reportedly getting into a fight with somebody from the Justice for Micah movement. His wife, 30-year-old Micah Miller, dying by an apparent suicide back in April. Some people believe that he had something to do with his wife's death. But to be very clear here, he has not been charged, and authorities confirm it was a suicide. Now, last week, the FBI searched John Paul Miller's home unrelated to Micah's death. John Paul Miller has a bond hearing today for the assault charge. We're going to update you on this story as more information becomes available.
Keep forgiving, and for the sake of Micah, she very much would have wanted me to continue to forgive her family.
For the first time, we're hearing from Solid Rock Church pastor John Paul Miller in a wide-ranging interview with our network partner News Nation about his relationship with his late wife Micah, abuse allegations, and how he says Micah's family let her down. Thank you for joining us at 11, everybody. I'm Edward Moody.
And I'm Trish Williford. News 13 reached out to John Paul several times, and he specifically refused to talk to us.
Yeah, News 13's Adriana Lawrence has followed this story from the very beginning. She spoke with the family's attorney about their reaction to the interview and where their focus is now.
The attorney representing Micah's family, Regina Ward, told me she watched the interview on News Nation 3 times. She says there were a number of lies, alarming body language, and deflecting. She thinks John Paul painted an unrealistic picture of how sick Micah was and says it's unfortunately what many victims of abuse experience.
What were your first thoughts when you were listening to that interview?
Yes. Got you.
Before the interview even started, John Paul Miller broke down in tears.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
It was, to me, it's like, oh, here we, instead of Pastor Miller, it's Actor Miller.
During his 2-hour interview with News Nation, John Paul said Micah threatened to kill herself multiple times. He said with him, she was happy and healthy, but once she was with her family and off her medication, her mental health suffered.
Like, I told her family this so many times you can't imagine. I told her friends this. I told everybody. I said, if y'all don't get her lithium, she's going to commit suicide.
Do you think there's any truth to that? I mean, have you heard anything from the family that she was dependent on medication?
No, in fact, she had been off of the medication for quite some time.
Ward says Micah was depressed, but she wasn't aware of any suicidal thoughts.
He contributed to that. I mean, you only had to watch the interview and you're exhausted by the end of it. And guess what? You only got to see the parts they clipped. Could you imagine sitting there through the whole thing? And then spend that 7 years of your life in your 20s.
Ward says she wasn't surprised John Paul did the interview, but would be surprised if John Paul's lawyers gave him permission.
I finally got the approval of my attorneys to do so. They, the ones working on the defamation cases, they said it's easier to win a defamation case the more the people talk.
During the interview, John Paul denied any allegations of abuse towards Micah, but Ward says Micah kept a detailed journal of John Paul's alleged controlling and manipulative behavior.
So what was your thoughts when he had said flat out, I never abused her?
Yeah, I was incensed. I was like, the audacity. And guess what? No one's buying it. There's too much evidence that shows otherwise.
Ward says many times victims of abuse are too afraid to speak out. She says she can imagine that was the case for Micah.
The one that's being abused is humiliated by it. They don't want anybody to know. Now, become the pastor's wife. You really don't want anybody to know that.
And because of that, Micah's family is now working to push forward Micah's Law or the Coercive Control Bill. It would strengthen protections for victims who experience forms of abuse like financial, mental, and emotional. She says this situation has connected with so many people for a reason.
But because all eyes of the nation and, in fact, the world have been on this case, which has really enlightened, I hope, the general public about this insidious problem that we have.
We reached out to John Paul lawyers Russell Long to ask if he was actually given permission to do that interview, but he told us no comment. And we asked John Paul for a statement, and he told us over text, quote, Ward is representing the person responsible for Micah's death. In the newsroom, Adriana Lawrence, News 13.
Remember, if you or a loved one are having suicidal thoughts, call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 or go online to www.988lifeline.org. Help is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Pray for justice for both of these young women who, in my opinion, were both murdered by their husbands. May the proof be obvious and the arrests be for life. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also, my channel has been demonetized for now. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd greatly appreciate it. The link is in the description.